waited so long that the gentleman over there believed that he was in my mind when I wanted to make my contribution. But Dr. Ahmad, he made a very good statement when he spoke about agriculture in the Caribbean. And we in the Caribbean, and every Barbadian, when there's some disaster or physical, something happens, too much rain or drought or something, don't worry about it, we can never feed ourselves. But you know, if Barbados, Trinidad, and all the Caribbean countries single out, we cannot feed themselves, I think together the Caribbean can. And that is something that I've been hearing from the thing. But what is, my point is that we separate agriculture from all the other ministries. And what we don't realize that because we do not have an inter-sectorial collaboration where the Ministry of Tourism separates itself from the Ministry of Agriculture, and also the other Ministry of Education separates itself from this other ministry, there's such a disparity between us that everybody looks down at agriculture. Even the ministers of agriculture look, when they're given this portfolio, oh, I have been degraded. And they don't recognize that agriculture is the most important ministry in any country. Any country that does not have a strong agricultural sector suffers. And even in my own small way, and looking in at what I've been reading and hearing, that if you do not, and you are not able to maintain your agricultural sector, then if there's a natural disaster, and the big daddies that we look up to, UK, USA, and all the big places we import, then we get up one morning and we find ourselves a city of sleeping people. Thank you.
Very good point. As a matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago we had, this gentleman and then the other one. Weeks ago we had the concern about the increase in the cost of wheat because of the use of it elsewhere. I think it was Russia who was holding it up for their people. They were not exporting. So if we don't start looking at what we can do for ourselves here, as you said, we'll wake up and realize that we're hungry.
I just want to zero our minds back to the target. We have two gentle ladies at the head table. Soils, permaculture, water, and the fisheries. Whatever happens on the land, in terms of land degradation, it ends up into the sea. So there has to be a continuity in terms of land and water and the sea. So I really appreciate the extra S on the SOS in terms of soil and sea, because whatever you do in your land, it ends up in the marine, and your marine life is totally destroyed. So the water issues as well as land. Your forests are cut down, you have no water. So my question after a while to Mrs. Rana, in terms of the permaculture, you said it was a mix in between conventional and organic. You know, the Caribbean is racing after the organic bandwagon right now. And the question, people have questions as to whether it can sustainably feed the region. So I think we need to learn a little more about the permaculture, culture of agriculture, and see how we can have a nice blend between proper sustainable practice on the farm and almost going towards but not ending up in organic, because all of the organic regulations are done from outside to us. Okay. That's because we have to access the market. So is it sustainable and profitable for us? So these are things that we have to tie into all the elements, the soil, the water, and the seas. They all are one part of the system.
Okay, just going back to the issues of soil and water. Permaculture deals a lot with change in the environment. Okay, the whole idea of permaculture is that you design your system so that it can deal with change. So it's perfect for what we're going through right now. Now, the person from Trinidad had said that we're getting storms, 25-year storms every 2 weeks and 50-year storms every 2 months kind of thing. And the whole idea is, with permaculture, you can design your site that you can actually trap all that water. You can trap a majority of the water. We went through the longest, hottest dry season last year, or no, this year? This year. I suffered. I'm a farmer. I know what it felt like. I almost drained all my ponds irrigating my land. And I took the decision I had to bring in an excavator and I had to change some of my landscape so I can trap my water. So that I have designed 5 or 6 acres of my watershed, that all the water that falls in it collects on my land before it leaves my land. So that for the first 2 months of all these storms that we had, none of that water actually left my land. It slowly collected in my ponds, it slowly percolated down into my land, all of this. And with permaculture you can do this because you're planting trees to slow down water as it hits your land. You're putting things on contours so that the water, instead of flowing straight off your land, percolates into your groundwater. And you're actually trapping water in ponds so that before it actually leaves your land, you have use of it. Now the ideal way of doing that is, with me trapping all this water from my 5 acres of land, I know that the water that I'm using for my crops is clean because I don't spray pesticides and I don't use herbicides. While rivers flowing through my land, I have no control over what is in that water. I have dead dogs in there sometimes, I have TVs floating by, I have all the pesticides that the farmers up the road are putting into their land, and I cannot use that water on my crops if I want to obtain any kind of certification. The other reason that I've gone into this is just the fact that my children enjoy eating fresh food. And the whole idea of, can I give this to my child and know that it was not sprayed yesterday, which some farmers in Trinidad will do and then put on the market, or whether it was sprayed according to 3 weeks ago and then left. None of that is known anymore, and all of those issues are what drive what I'm doing. Now with these soils, a lot of work from this gentleman right here is in soil chemistry, but very little is actually known in soil biology. Not as much work has gone into soil biology. Soils are living things. If you take a handful of soil, there's 5 billion creatures in there, more than the population of humans on this earth. Now, we are continually seeing that as we spray our soils and as we put chemicals in there, we are creating dead soils. And dead soils will not produce much for us, that we have to continuously pump things into it. So that a lot of work is also needed in conserving soil biology and finding out more about what actually lives in the soil. Like, we know the NPK that we can put in the soil, but do we know what varieties of bacteria and funguses that you can put in the soil so that it would stimulate your crop production?
Professor, what I wanted to hear from you, what do you feel about the soilless kind of agriculture that is hitting us in the region? I'd like you to make a comment on that.
It's on the floor.
Yeah, David, I remember in the 1980s in Trinidad, every other backyard had some kind of hydroponic enterprise and it faded out. So it's not the first time. What will happen is that the price of the produce will always remain high by that kind of production. That's right. That's one thing. The other thing is that you can only grow some crops. How much vegetables are we going to utilize? We want to get staples, cereals, root crops, roots and tubers, grain legumes, and soilless culture is not applicable to those things. So we should never ignore the soils. And the other thing is that if you have good farming in the countryside, it is nice for tourists to see that, instead of all the bush and last row and ruinate or whatever they call it throughout Wamil, or plenty names for that kind of thing. We don't want that. We want good, successful agriculture in the countryside to beautify the countryside. So we should never ignore this.
Hi, my name is Neil Paul. I just wanted to make 2 points. I am old enough to remember, and I worked in another incarnation in the OECS Natural Resources Management Unit, which is now called Environmental Sustainable Development Unit, or something like that, S2. Now, there were, at the time where I worked there, it wasn't very long ago, there was an approach called Island Systems Management, ISM. It suggested that in the small islands, and even on the mainland territories, that we ought to see the countries as a coast, not as a landmass, because it was too small. Something happening in the middle of like a rainfall in the middle of the island would manifest itself in plumes on the beach in about an hour. So that the approach was to an island system management. I don't know what happened to that. I'm not hearing anything about it anymore. The other thing, there was an IADP, an integrated approach to development planning, which we were working on and was big. We were talking about all the integration of all the the sectors so that everybody knows what is going on and we can have synergies, and so that too seems to have gone the way of all flesh. And with the fisheries lady was talking about, the fisheries gentle lady was talking about the zoning and the sea. I remember in St. Lucia there is called oh, by the way, I'm from St. Lucia. The Soufriere Marine Management Area, where they developed a plan with all the stakeholders to manage that resource, so that people who were doing jet skis, people who were fishing, people who were diving, people who were just bathing, people who were doing bathing dogs or horses or whatever, everybody had an understanding of what and how to manage this resource. So it's like we're hearing the same things over and over again.
I think one of the problems is that our policy systems have been so weak to almost insignificant that we can never maintain. We always have to go back and start from scratch, and that is why we keep hearing it over and over again. We have had too many weak policies or policies sent down from outside, like the banana industries, always from outside, etc. That is our problem, weak policy structure.
The SMMA, the Soufriere Marine Management Area, has been very successful in what it has done, and it's actually an example of very good space use, the management of it, and not just on paper, but in implementation. And I think what I was talking about was actually broader scale. Like the SMMA is a small area, but you have each country has an exclusive economic zone. Sometimes they have not negotiated this, although some countries have done so recently. Some of the boundaries, they need to negotiate for it. But that entire EEZ needs to be managed. You need to know what you want to do with it, because there are conflicting uses sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommaso Perio by FEO. I would like to interact a bit with the gentleman from Trinidad and Tobago that is stressing that he never approached assistance. So I would actually like to know why, as we are often speaking of the need to look through the entire chain and therefore moving up. There are things in which you actually should ask us for assistance, or eventually should pretend assistance, that include information on market networking, access to credit, and with respect to our environmental related subject of the very moment, you should ask for assistance onto the understanding what is the situation of your soils, what is the aquifer that you are confronting in your cultivation, so that it is better understood at farming level what is the environment that is surrounding, also from a researcher and scientific point of view, and find the link between all the various bits and pieces that we always say are not related to each other. I'm really curious to know the reason why there is not an approach to the authority. Thank you.
There are systems after 10-15 years where the organic systems produce just as much as, or even more, as the intensive agriculture system. It doesn't go overnight, but you have to come up to that. So that's one quick point. The other thing is in terms of things new. In 2003, after the Nobel Prizes were announced, the BBC has this program which they call the Nobel Minds. And since 2003, the Nobel Minds have predicted that the next third industrial revolution would be what they call distributed energy. That is basically where farms and houses and everything else have things like solar and wind and all of those things, consume what they want for their own use, and then put it out on the grid. That is the basis of the third industrial revolution as they are predicting, which is something ties back to the price of food and the price of oil. So that is something that I just wanted to comment on and interject in terms of not hearing the same thing over and over. And I think that that is something positive. However, in Trinidad and Tobago, we were trying to do something with solar at Cabby, and TNTech would not allow you to use a switch that takes the excess into their grid. So we really do have to capitalize on all of these possibilities for agriculture, to get those companies who are state-owned to change their